and warm welcome to everybody, our esteemed and leader comrades who are going to share their thoughts today. Very warm welcome for you to find the time to be here amidst your struggle movements and other public movements. Thank you to all who have joined in and who are joining in as the session goes on. It promises to be a very exciting session. I am Sandeep Chachra, and I have the honor and privilege of moderating together with Kathy this very important session. This session, friends and comrades, is on the lessons of Indian farmers' movement, the ongoing lessons and the ongoing movement. As you know, or as you may know, the Indian farmers' movement, several histories of it, but the current one is one of the most peaceful, one of the largest, and one of the longest peaceful protests of citizens anywhere across the world. It's been ongoing for the last 170 days or more. If I take a very defined starting point, if I don't, then you can say it's been a long durée of people's struggles starting way back in Maharashtra, in even further back into recent history. This particular movement, friends, was spurred by introduction of three new farm laws. I'll read them. The Farmers Produce and Trade Commerce Act, the Farmers Agreement on Price Assurance and Farmers Services Act, and the Essential Commodities Act. These are the names of these acts which were introduced into the lower house of the parliament and subsequently on the 22nd of September last year, amidst the COVID situation, to the upper house of the parliament, the Rajya Sabha, and passed hastily without much public discussion and debate. And the names of these acts, I'd invite you to read these later in substance, and the names of these acts are significantly misleading, and we'll hear the speakers speak to it, of what has been the angst here and why are people protesting, why are peasants across the country protesting with reference to this immediate passage of acts. But as you know, the roots of this struggle are not just the act or the recent acts. They lie in the long, unsettled question, the question of land and the prevailing agrarian crisis, which has only worsened since the liberalization of the 90s. So the condition of peasantry in the country is a condition of extreme precarity. And if we want to see it in the last 2 years, last 1.5 years, hit further harder into extreme levels of precarity with the ongoing pandemic. So it is in this context that this discussion becomes very important, not just for India, but for the global context, the global South, as well as the global North, onto looking at questions of the unresolved questions of land, labor, peasantry, and agriculture. These are all interrelated questions of history, unresolved in history, despite the end of colonialism. We have wonderful speakers today. At this, we are really honored. We have Comrade Amarjit Kaur. We have Ms. Kanimozhi Karunanidhi, who is a member of our lower house of the parliament, Indian parliament. We have Professor Manoj, who is also a member of the Indian parliament hailing from Bihar. He is on the upper house of the parliament. We have Professor Praveen, a noted academic on agrarian and land and labor questions. We have Dr. Yogendra Yadav, who, as you know, is part of the coordination committee of the ongoing farmers movement from the Jai Kisan Andolan and also from the Swaraj Abhiyan and party. I'll introduce the speakers in detail as the speakers are set to speak. And I have the honor and privilege, first off, to invite Comrade Amarjit Kaur. All those who are gathered, Comrade Amarjit Kaur is the General Secretary of the All India Trade Union Congress. And let me just say that she is the first woman General Secretary of a major trade union, in this case, a progressive trade union after independence. So It's wonderful to see that she is leading the trade union there. Comrade Kaur has a long history of struggle, resistance. She has been the leader of the Students' Federation, AISF, and also she was before this till recently the leader of the National Federation for Indian Women. Great privilege to have her. Comrade Kaur is very active with the farmer struggle. In fact, 2 weeks ago, she hails from Punjab but represents India, so it's not a state here. But 2 weeks ago, she was at the border there, and I'm sure she's going in and coming out despite the COVID situation, extending the workers' solidarity with the peasantry. And with this, and without much further ado, I have the privilege, Comrade Amarjit Kaur, to invite you. Ma'am, we have about 12 to 15 minutes for each speaker, focusing on the lessons you see, the questions you see. Thank you very much, and please, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Sandeep. First of all, I really want to thank the organizers for picking up this subject, which is so important, not only in Indian context, but it is important to have lessons the world over, all those people who are into movements fighting for justice, equality, for their livelihoods or safeguard of their livelihoods, etc. Today is 19th May, and on 26th May, this movement will complete its 6 months. So rightly said that it is a very, very long, peaceful movement happening here. The farmers have recently, their Sanyukta Kisan Morcha has declared that they are going to observe 26th May as a Black Day. And yesterday only in AITUC, All India Trade Union Congress, we decided we will extend support to this Black Day observation by the farmers. Sanyukta Kisan Morcha means that united front which they have formed, under whose banner they are putting up this battle. This Black Day means that was the day, 26th May, when the present regime took oath in 2019 when they second time came to the power. And the farmers are so much agitated that this government is deaf and dumb, doesn't listen to us, and doesn't care. Even in these COVID times, instead of listening to us, they are trying to find alibis how they should crush this movement. So they want to say that it was Black Day for us the day this government took oath. Because the way they have been behaving. So that day there are going to be black flag hoisting everywhere by farmers. This is the call. And we are in negotiation with other trade unions also. If all the trade unions together, we could extend support. So the first achievement I should say, and the lesson I should say is, that in this particular movement, the working class and farming community have come together. And when Sandeep was mentioning, I was there just 2 weeks before. Actually, I was there on May Day. It was first time in Indian history that trade unions national platform of our central trade union organizations who are putting up battle together on workers issues, they and the joint front of the farmers movement, they together decided to observe May Day. So it was a worker farmers unity, which from the very first day on 26 November, when they began their present struggle I'm talking about, this workers farmers unity, this was the slogan. They used it from the very beginning, and with the trade unions also used it, not only from 26 November, even before, during the previous time of this present government from 2014 onwards, when they had come out with the changes in the Land Acquisition Act, and actually they brought ordinances. 3 times the ordinances were brought. All the times the farmers came on streets, and every time trade unions expressed their solidarity, and ultimately those ordinances failed. Parliamentary Standing Committee had given some recommendations government refused to listen to. But when the second time they took power on 26th May in 2019, after that, the attack on the working class, attack on the farming community, attack on other sections of the society who were putting up battle on their respective issues, that attack was put forward more nakedly and more aggressively by this government. So naturally, the struggle spilled over, and in this present regime time, the efforts were to use COVID situation as an opportunity. And the government did not hide their intentions. They openly said that we will convert this disaster into opportunity. But people thought that opportunity is for building India or taking its problems out, trying to solve those problems. It was not so. The intentions were very clear, but they could not achieve during the previous regime time. They wanted to use this COVID situation time when they can stop the agitations, the movements, the actions, the strikes, using this COVID situation, their health advisories. So not letting the movements happen at that time to pursue their policies of privatizing the public sector enterprises, even the government departments, and also taking away the land of farmers. So this was understood by the farming community that the government is after land and they want to hand over that land to their corporate friends. This was being understood by them in the previous times also, but in this particular time, they understood much more well when these three laws were forcibly adopted in the parliament. These bills were forcibly adopted. In the lower house, they had majority. They did it by voice vote. But in Rajya Sabha, upper house, when they found they will not be able to get through because maybe some of their own allies will not support, so they suspended 8 MPs, and then in the melee, parliamentary norms, forms, everything was put into just dustbin, and they, with voice vote, they announced that they have passed. And after that, when the MPs were in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, lower house and upper house, they were not attending parliament because they were saying that bring back those MPs who have been suspended from the house. During that period, the workers' labor codes were also pushed into the parliament. No discussions happened. No opposition was present, and they were also so stung by that. Workers were already in agitation, and farmers were already opposing these bills because they were brought through ordinances. So they were saying that take back these ordinances. So the agitation did not begin on 26 November. The agitation of farmers was on from June itself. And the agitation of working class was on from its previous regime to the next regime, when the government was forcing all the codification of labor laws. Achievements of 150 years were supposed to be put into dustbin by this present government, pushing us back into British era, rather pushing us back 150 years ago, taking away all our achievements. So I would say that this agitation took deep roots, and they began. 26 November was our strike call. Trade unions of India had given a strike call, and 27 November, 2 days they had put on that these farmers organizations will march towards Delhi. So 26 they will start marching, and 27 they will be reaching capital city of the country, Delhi. So we extended support to their march. They extended support to our strike. This is, I should say, a very big lesson, as well as what needs to be carried forward, what needs to be further strengthened. The bond between the struggle of working class and the farming community needs more and more to be consolidated. So this lesson which has come out of this needs to be pursued further. 26 November, they supported us in rural areas in this Bandh activity. And we supported in their March situation all the trade unions. And on 27th, when they started their sit-in, they were stopped to come to Delhi on the borders of, on the outskirts of Delhi state. At that time, the trade unions came out with solidarity and support to them. And since then, continuously the trade union movement of our country is extending support to all their action programs, whatever they are announcing. Wherever physically present, we do it, and wherever otherwise extending solidarity in other forms, we have been doing it. So this is the biggest lesson. Second thing which I would like to say, that in this movement, such a long movement, such a peaceful movement, the students went in support, youth went in support, women organizations went in support, the writers, the artists, the journalists, all sections of the society who were feeling that they have been cheated by this government, who were waging struggles of their issues and agitations were being ignored, not being listened to, catcalling was happening, trollers were being pushed against their leaders. All those sections wanted to come out and support this movement. So this movement became a fulcrum for everybody to come near it and to have their expression, their hurt feelings, and they wanted to this movement to get more strength through their actions also. That was the achievement of this movement, and that is also a great learning lesson. From the very beginning, from 2014 itself, we were finding, beginning with the so-called slogan of Ghar Vapsi, then the whole issue of Kauslatar, then the whole issue of love jihad, which continues even today. The laws are being framed in different states. In different ways, the minorities were being cornered in our country. And as and when anybody will speak for them, irrespective of the religion they belong to, irrespective of the political understanding they belong to, they were trolled. The cyber cafe people of the ruling regime were simply abusing, trolling, threatening. All that was happening. All those intelligentsia, all those people who were feeling suffocated, there was a movement of award returning of awards. Those writers were ridiculed by the present regime. So their trollers were after their life. So they also felt, no, this is the movement which has shown that this regime can be challenged. You can challenge them on streets, and you can challenge them peacefully, and you can challenge them continuously, and you can see to it that you are not removed from the streets, from the roads. So they were sitting on highways. So the very big lesson from here is that all those people who felt that they are cheated, they are not being listened to, their voices are being throttled, their democratic rights are being taken away, the secular democratic ethos of Indian Constitution are threatened. All of them came closer to this movement, not only closer, they reached there, they took it, many of them, as pilgrimage. They said, it is a pilgrimage to get strength from this movement. So they felt that they are not only going and giving strength to that movement, they are also gaining strength from them. They are not only giving confidence to them, they are going and gaining confidence from them. And the confidence is that this government can be challenged. The confidence is that you can sustain the movements. Confidence is you can have a prolonged movement. Confidence is that you can have a movement where there is self-service also, where there is selfless service also, where there is community kitchen also, where nobody is hungry and there are people to feed them. Resources are mounting and mounting from all sections of the society. So very great lesson was that various kinds of movements saw reflection in this movement. and they wanted to unite with this movement, and that did happen. So in sustenance of this movement, the support of all sections of our society has also been a great strength. Then another thing which I found, as I have been coming out and then going in, coming out and then going on, keeping continuously close contact with the movement, and doing whatever possible from trade union point of view also. What we found was that the socio-cultural aspects are very important, and that we saw it. People drew strength from their past history. They drew strength from the social values of community being together in difficult times, helping each other, standing with each other. So socio-cultural aspects have been seen over here. There were all attempts, as it was done earlier. For last 6-7 years, what we have been finding, anybody raising voice is told anti-national. Anybody raising voice is booked under either sedition or under another draconian law, UAPA. Most of the institutions, democratic institutions of the country, have been played with, muddled with, weakened, or filled with the people you see, only speak for the government and speak against the people who are raising their issues. So also we found that the media, vast majority of media, was playing a role, and that role was of only supporting the government and voicing the concern of divisive politics. Not only concern of divisive politics, supporting the divisive politics. The whole idea of polarization in our society and divisive politics, which is being pursued for several years now, that was attempted on this movement also. And they told them you are terrorists, they told them you are Khalistanis, they told them it is only some Sikhs doing it, it is only one religious group doing it. One after another allegations were made, and this movement has told, no, nothing doing. We are farmers, and farmers belong to all communities, all religions, all caste groups, all beliefs, all cultural backgrounds, all cultural ethos. So we are plural, and we believe in pluralism, and we will not allow this divisive politics to prevail upon and let our movement be killed. So this was a great relief to all those people who have been during different times agitating against the policies of this government, be it students' community, campuses, beginning from Periyar Institute of Periyar organization, which was first of all denied funds from IIT Chennai, then Rohit Vemula's agitation, or Pune Institute, the Art and Film Drama Institute, the agitation of those students, then Jawaharlal Nehru University, Jamia Millia, Aligarh Muslim University, Banaras Hindu University, Allahabad University, University in Bengal. In different places, the students were on agitations. Similarly, anti-CAA agitation happened, which was being led by women, which was something great, and they were also named, shamed, trolled, everything was done with them. So everybody was feeling as if any movement will come up and this government will ignore, then troll, and then finish off this movement. But no movement gets finished off. Every movement gives a lesson for the new movement. And I can say that all these movements which were there, all those movements saw reflection into this Kisan movement, and they wanted to be there. And that's why I think the lesson to be drawn from here is every movement feels that this farmers movement must win. It should not lose. It's not only their headache that they want to safeguard land for themselves. It's not only their question that their produce should get proper price. It is actually a question of food security of our country. It is a question of land to remain with the people. It is actually a question of defeating the politics of corporatization of land. So I know I am overshooting my time. I would like to conclude by saying when the question answers will come, I will be able to reply. And moreover, other panelists, able panelists will be touching us several other points. So what I would definitely in the end say that not only 26th May, this Black Flag Day, they are also beginning Mission Uttar Pradesh and Mission Uttarakhand. They had a mission during these 5 state elections. And the result has been very good that despite all efforts, the ruling regime had to face slap on their face because the farmers had gone to Bengal, they had gone to Kerala, they had gone to Tamil Nadu, and they saw the results. Now they are going to Uttarakhand and Uttar Pradesh, Mission Uttar Pradesh, Mission Uttarakhand. Yogendra Yadav ji he will be able to tell you more on that, what is going on under discussion, what they will be doing actually. But what is that? It is to one by one to tell the government we will have innovative methods, we have enough energy, we have enough resources, we have enough understanding. Once we have taken up the challenge, we will evolve new methods and we will continue and sustain this movement till we get the victory. And one discourse they have brought to the focus is that land belongs to them, no corporatization. The trade unions are also saying, don't corporatize everything, let the things belong to people. And these two things also coincide. And this is also becoming a very good slogan coming together of farmers and workers. And I think I feel privileged as a trade unionist to speak for farmers about their movement, having lessons from them, giving our experiences to them, and then looking at ultimately we believe in people. Once the people understand, and that is the first success they had, and then they had rest of the successes, and that was they succeeded in pushing their point and their understanding why they are opposing this farm bill, they could take it to the ordinary family of the farmer. And that was the great victory. Anybody not understanding the nitty-gritty of these farm laws understood, oh, he wants our land to be given to Adanis and Ambanis. We will not allow it. Even a commoner, illiterate person is able to tell. So all age groups, and in the end, being a woman, I do recognize that women have been given respect. They are in large number there, old people, young people, children, men, women, everybody. Women have been given respect, and on it, sometimes, several times, women were given the leadership in the stage. They were given leadership in the stage also. And so this movement also... So this issue also is important that the women got a chance, too much respect also given to them. They handled the stage also several times in between, and especially on International Women Day also, they have been running the show. So women power has been seen. So a gender equity questions also became important questions during this farmers movement. Women were also given the space. And Sandeep, thank you for giving this time to me, even though I have taken more time as I should have taken. I stop it here only.
It's my apologies to stop you with your beautiful fiery intervention and speech with the revolutionary sentiment, which we all inspired with. I am not going to repeat what Comrade Amarjit Kaur has said, an attempt to summarize a beautiful intervention to begin with. I rather now have the privilege, and we'll have questions to her. Please keep your questions coming. She is with us. I now have the privilege to invite Professor Manoj Jha, Professor Manoj Jha originally hails from Bihar and is a professor at one of India's premier social work schools, the Delhi School of Social Work. I've had the privilege of working with him over the last 2 decades. At this moment, Professor Jha is the member of Indian Parliament, the upper house of the Indian Parliament, and he's also the national spokesperson for the Rashtriya Janata Dal, the political party he represents in the parliament, a party which has taken a very, very progressive stand on various people's issues, including of the Farmers Act in question. And the national spokesperson, Professor Jha, who's been very actively speaking in Parliament in defense of people's questions over the last several years. It's a privilege for me to introduce you, Professor Manoj Jha, both as a member of our parliament, a professor, and a friend. And I now invite you to make your intervention. I will again request you to keep your intervention up to 12 to 15 minutes in addition to what Comrade Kaur has said. Over to you, Professor Jha.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you, Kathy. But before I do that, I shall surely stick to the timeline. You know, I represent a political party uh, which has 5 members in upper house, and I get normally in a 2-hour bill or 3-hour bill, I get 3 to 4 minutes, and if I stretch it, it is never beyond 4.5 or 5 minutes. So I've got used to. Although being a teacher, you get 50 minutes in the classroom, but now I'm used to lesser time. Thank you. Amarjit has done a great favor to me because she has spoken about the timeline of the movement. She has spoken about the background, the context. So I'll rather not get into it. I will wish all the participants, I have beautiful names here, uh, those whom I have worked, Yogendra bhai, Praveen ji, Kanimozhi, she was my comrade in Rajya Sabha. Now she has moved from upper to lower, a kind of demotion in lighter vein. Uh, and Praveen ji is also here, and I can see approximately 160 participants from all over. So I wish all of them, I give them a revolutionary salute. I begin by the procedure which was adopted in the parliament, and I have said it time and again in the parliament, that a majority in parliament is necessary for government, but a majoritarian parliament results in anti-government, anti-people policies. So the distinction between a majority in parliament and a majoritarian parliament, we have seen enough instances in last 7-8 years. I hope, I hope in coming times to come, we don't see it quite often. Uh, Rather, I would not like to see it. Secondly, my second argument is not argument. My second visual I get every time is the fact that I was there on that day, fateful day, I would say, when this piece of set of legislations were rushed through. I can never forget, because this was not the image I had brought in while joining Indian Parliament, taking oath on Indian Constitution. As Amarjit ji very rightly said, you know, they had majority in lower house, and they used that brute majority. Uh, but in upper house, that is Rajya Sabha in India, they did not have that majority. So first they went for managed majority. That was not happening, for the reasons that many regional parties were worried that what shall be the impact of this decision in their home state, in their constituencies. So the second mechanism which was adopted was a coercive majority. That is, you use coercion to bring in a majority, and we saw the display of arrogance, uh, uh, downright disregard for parliamentary democracy and how it functioned. As he rightly said, many of our colleagues were suspended. But more worrisome than the fact that the government tried to give a message on that day to everybody that our majority allows us to do whatever we want. even if it's anti-people. Because somewhere, if you read between the lines of all these legislation, they tell you very clearly that somebody has sponsored this legislation. Some people have sponsored these legislations. They are too powerful. Unfortunately, democracies all over the world, what we find in, there are instances that electorates are not simply the stakeholders in democracy. There are greater and better stakeholders, those who control the very pulse rate of the party in power.
Manojji, you're frozen. Professor Manoj, you're frozen. The link is broken, Professor Manoj.
Was lots of noise. Again, no
Hello?
discussion,
Yeah.
hush hush manner, said it was going to happen. Beautiful, it will bring in beautiful things to Kashmir. Normalities are being restored, but there was no normalcy. There is no normalcy. Similarly, there has been a disruption in the life and times of the people on account of the farmers, the kind of new I'll tell you, in my democracy these days, there is a beautiful word they use to denigrate the movement, the participants, and that they call toolkit. Probably forgetting the fact that the greatest toolkit in democracy is to remain sure that you stick to pro-people policies. You stick to parliamentary procedure. You stick to the fact that your policies should emanate out of what we call the Constitution of India. If you read between the lines of several legislations passed in last 3 years in particularly since the second term of this government, you would find that the very idea of constitutional engagement of legislation has been jettisoned. I hope not probably forever. Number one. Number two, as I said earlier, now what happens then when they use that toolkit, as Amarjit ji also said, their very idea, for instance, I teach this paper, social movement, in my university. And we had lots of instances, theories. I'll not get into the theories of movement, what is the role of emotion, how the participation level is enhanced, or how participation level is evaluated. But most importantly, we were taught that in a democracy, state should learn, the government should learn to engage with a movement. You might not agree with 100 things. Forget engagement with the movement. What our government did here, they did everything to denigrate and to the extent of demonizing the movement. Probably Yogendra Bhai will tell you many more things. You know, suddenly the Khalistani, the anti-national, and I think this discourse or this rhetoric of anti-national, we have heard so much that it, whatever sheen it had in their initial days, it has lost all that. So since the first day of the movement, and I would say this movement, the farmers movement, actually gave a sense of direction to the parliament also. When this was passed, all of us were very low, depressed, feeling that we couldn't do anything. We thought this is the beginning. They'll go berserk, they'll destroy everything. They have done enough. But when the farmers movement started speaking for itself at different borders of Delhi, in different parts of India, you know, somewhere democracy got strengthened. People thought, look, voting day and the decision on the voting day, on the counting day, is not the final decision. We matter. We shall matter. But the government chose the other corridor. As I said, denigrating the participants, demonizing the people on the street or on the roads, speaking continuously through the mainstream media And this sounds very worrisome to me, because America was a very powerful state in the 1967 when the Vietnam War was going on. But yet, in American media, the so-called mainstream media, you had the images of protesters. You had the images of those people who had the audacity to say, down with America, down with imperialism, down with American policy. We have huge dearth of that kind of media. The second, which is again an argument which we find not only through the farmers movement, but also we saw it in anti-CA protest, and then subsequently during this corona mismanagement. The essential argument which comes from the government occasionally, weekly, 24/7 many a time, don't do politics. I mean, Ajif, what is politics? I mean, in the 7th standard or 6th standard, we were taught that politics is an art, or call it science if you wish to intervene in resource distribution. Who gets what, where, when, how, and why. If this be the essential definition of politics, then people should do more about it. People should do more of politics. But then again, I would say that in the anti-Vietnam War, anti-French movement, French student movement, we had a major section of the media that gave support to the agitating students in France, or to the young boys and girls on streets of America in 1967. Now, in our case, what is happening? What I said, that this movement gave lots of confidence to people. Those who thought that the parliament can be bulldozed, they were told, no boss, this is not the end. People are sitting there. They spent entire winter, and I must tell all of you who are not familiar with the geography and the climate of Delhi. Delhi is very chilly, very chilling in November, December to January. They fought that winter. They not only fought the cold government, they fought the cold weather, and they fought bravely. People kept going, coming in, joining in solidarity. But essentially, if I look at it, it was the farmers who gave hope. And look, again, the government narrative was, these are all big farmers. I mean, this government believes in looking for a division, when looking or creating a division, even if it does not exist. Big farmers, but small farmers. It doesn't work that way, boss. It didn't work. That's why I said that if I have to evaluate or talk about the experiences of this movement, the first experience is, it has taught us, don't lose heart. Look, movements are not simply, traditionally we have been hearing about it. Success or failure does not define a movement. We can give French student movement of 1968. It failed, but it changed the political discourse in France. Similarly, it might not. I mean, I wish it succeeds. I would do anything, whatever in my capacity, to make sure that it succeeds. But even if it does not get 100% success, I can assure my fellow participants, our experience tells us that Indian democracy shall be strengthened. Whatever anomalies have taken place, they shall be set aside. Whatever kind of binaries we are told every day, this nation versus that nation, which can go on in anything, including vaccination, including corona pandemic, that discourse will see a very soon an expiry date. And finally, I would say that this movement, I would consider it was a spontaneous movement, no matter what my government says. And coincidentally, my government, like many governments of the world, does not say truth. It's post-truth times. So they believe their truth should be the truth, and all other versions of truth are lesser truth or they are lies. So it was spontaneous. The strength of this movement is spontaneity. Second, it has drawn young people, even like the CA movement. Now, when the young minds start going out of their comfort zone to a kind of zone which is not that comfortable, that gives you a sense of a direction, also a sense of purpose. I would say, though there was a legacy of such movement, but last couple of years we have seen a kind of silence, conspicuous silence. The last experiment we had in the name of a movement, uh, it has given many such images. I'm talking about India against corruption movement. So many people thought we better not to have such movements if the kind of anomalies it has created. Now, cultural universality and language. This movement also has given us a new set of language, and I would love to call it a toolkit for a better democracy, a toolkit for a better India, a toolkit where we are not taught to hate our neighboring countries, a toolkit which is inclusive based on Indian constitution, and we go for an inclusive political discourse, and a toolkit which tells us that on any day, no matter which government is in power, my government and my nation cannot be equated. They are now never is equal to. Because if I love my nation, we do a lot, probably much more than the ones who talk about loving the nation. If we love the nation, I must be able to, like my fellow farmers, my comrades, must be able to keep pointing out the anomalies in governance, the arrogance of the governance, the adamancy of the government, and the supersized ego of the government. Thank you very much again, Yepe. It was wonderful. I'll be there throughout the session. And once again, uh, congratulate you and wish you all that with these kind of initiatives, probably we'll be able to the kind of cocoon mentality which is setting in different countries. And we were late in joining that kind of mentality, but we have grown up faster. Let's see that the regression starts. Thank you very much.
Thank
Inkalab.
you. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor Manoj Jha. And your parting message of internationalism as a necessary sort of counter to the rising tide of chauvinistic nationalism, we note. And I'm happy to say there are many people from many countries joining in today. Thank you for your very rich input, including your parting words. I now have the privilege and honor of inviting, without much further ado, Professor Praveen Jha, professor at the JNU, professor of economics, planning at the Center for Economic Planning and Social Studies at the JNU and Informal Studies. Professor Praveen Jha is one of the key founders of the Agrarian South Network, as well as the editor of the International Journal of Political Economy, Agrarian South, a person who's written extensively, has been an organic intellectual across movements, was on the last national commission or national committee which did the extensive 300-page document on what needs to be done on the question of land and agriculture. Probably he'll touch on it. I am privileged to introduce him in my modest way. I am also a student and a friend, and I welcome you, Professor Jha, Praveen Jha, for your intervention. As always, I request you to keep to time. Thank you so much, and looking forward to listen to you, sir.
Thank you, Sandeep, for very warm and generous words of welcome. Thank you for including me in this particular conversation, which is extremely important to AEPF and the coordinators of this particular session. I express my gratitude for having organized this particular panel discussion and including me in this. I will very soon switch off my video because I have a very poor connection, so that I'm able to at least sort of connect with you in some audible manner. So now my preceding speakers, both the moderators, Kathy and Sandeep, and then the fellow panelists, Professor Manoj Jha and Amarjit ji have really set the ball rolling in excellent fashion in terms of the context and some very powerful lessons. I'll try and not repeat too much, but of course I'll emphasize a couple of those points. And with that, let me get going. Now, as Sandeep rightly mentioned, the context of this movement is indeed extremely complex. There was an immediate trigger, which has been emphasized and which was analyzed very well by both Amarjit ji and Manoj ji. But then the longer context is something which is extremely important to understand. We don't have time to get into the details of that, but I'll draw a couple of lessons from that and how that has translated into the political discourse of the movement itself. But the first most powerful lesson, since we are focusing on lessons, is the fact of the scale, intensity, and tenacity of the ongoing movement. In fact, it reminds us of what happened during the pre-independence period. In fact, it got its heft, the pre-independence nationalist movement got its heft in large measure from what happened amongst the peasantry, within the peasantry during 1920s, 30s, and then the kind of mobilization that it generated. That really was the most powerful, if you like, muscle of the nationalist movement. And then that has, hastened several things and so on. So that is an extremely powerful lesson. And now what we need to really do is to try and decode that lesson, understand that lesson, analyze that lesson in multiple ways through multiple correlates, causal connections, etc. I mean, I think that really is, a story within the story that we need to sort of take forward in terms of decoding this grand, very powerful message, right, in terms of the underlying lessons and so on. Some of the points have, of course, been highlighted in terms of what those correlates, causal and political correlates are. As Amarjit ji rightly pointed out, the combined power of the working classes, in particular, what we are referring to is non-agricultural working classes and the peasantry. They're coming together and building this cooperation in a very concerted fashion has been an extremely, extremely important lesson. And how has that happened? As I said, we need to then go beyond what we see and try and understand what the factors are. I mean, some of those lessons, as I said, I'll try and come towards the end. It has been a very broad-based kind of support for the movement as a whole, different sections, all that was highlighted, so let me not repeat that. Third very important thing that we need to note is that for the first time, and this again is a very powerful lesson, that the ruling government, the regime, has managed to capture the entire paraphernalia of the state, the might of the state, and a whole lot of other institutions, including the media. Through that, it generated extremely false but very powerful narratives, completely false and powerful narratives. The credit of the movement, and that is the lesson which I want to highlight, is to counter that very creatively and equally powerfully. Of course, they cannot match that might in terms of the resources, but in terms of a whole lot of invisible connects, as late Ho Chi Minh used to say, that it is the connections between people which is the most powerful counter to the powers that be. And that exactly has been the nature of this particular movement. And in very creative ways, making those connections, including all those, since toolkit is being highlighted repeatedly. So let me also mention that very interesting kinds of, metaphorical toolkits which have been part of it. So that is, again, the countering, the lesson is how do you counter this extremely bloody-minded, extremely powerful, extremely arrogant state, which was continuously sort of harping on all kinds of lies repeatedly, right? It was using all kinds of false narratives, all kinds of misinformation to try and discredit the movement. It was repeatedly and completely, as I said, downright abusive. Yeah. So, that is something which we need to take note of, how the movement has very successfully not completely neutralized it, but has put it on the back foot. So that's yet another very important lesson that we need to sort of highlight. Of course, the fact that it has been sustained, it actually started in June 2020 in Punjab, soon after the ordinances were passed. It became, it went beyond Punjab to other sort of neighboring states, and very soon it became pan-India. Even before people came to Delhi, it already had acquired a pan-Indian character. And that itself is something which is very important to flag. And then, this movement is now going to be almost 1 year old, right? So that is how we need to see that sustained, and how, what were the strategies which were employed in sustaining it, again, is something that we need to decode, etc. Right? Now, mass movements typically are the most important teachers for all those who are members of it, all those who are participating in it. Right? As I've already said, anti-colonial movement was a great teacher. What did it do? And what is this particular movement doing? Trying to address all the fault lines, which are massive sort of fault lines in our country. Fault lines to do with caste, to do with class, to do with religion, gender divisions, and so on. Just to give you one example, for instance, only 7 years ago, 6 to 7 years ago, we had the worst communal kind of riots and divides in northwestern India, in particular Western UP. That is what I'm referring to. Muzaffarnagar was the sort of epicenter of it, where it seems as if the divisions which have been created between the Jats, Hindu Jats, and the Muslims will never be healed. But just look at the way it has progressed during the last 1 year or so, right? It is an amazing kind of development, very heartening development, especially in the light of the fact that one of the biggest, most powerful assaults that we have seen by the current regime is on India's secular fabric. Now, this particular movement is challenging that very, very powerfully, extremely powerfully. Right? Now, that is one of the sort of lessons which we must take note of, must celebrate. Likewise, as I said, if you have seen all images of various protest sites and so on, the participation and the leadership of women in this particular movement is again an extremely powerful thing. Right? Likewise, if you think in terms of, for instance, the kind of divisions which were there, let's say, between the Dalit agricultural laborers and the middle caste, upper caste kind of cultivating classes, clearly, there is a coming together. So things which seemed as if very, very powerful structural divides and barriers, many of those things have been addressed in very powerful ways. I would not say that they have been completely transcended. these things do not get translated completely, given some 3,000 years of history or so in terms of shaping these, but very significant progresses have been made. So, coming together as a broad movement across all these fault lines and across sort of not only divisions within the agricultural classes, the sort of landlords, better off agricultural classes to working classes and so on, but across agriculture and non-agriculture. That again is a very powerful lesson that we have to kind of take note of. In short, what I'm trying to say is the democratizing and unifying role of the Kisan movement is, to my mind, the most powerful lesson. Second most powerful lesson is its ability to sustain itself against all odds in this extremely difficult time of the pandemic, and all the associated challenges. The fact that it has sustained itself for almost 1 year now and is looking as good, it is not kind of backing off, is an extremely important message that it provides us. And the last sort of point that I'd like to highlight in this context is that academics have been talking about a number of things for a long time relating to agrarian question, agrarian challenges, agrarian issues, and so on and so forth. I just want to highlight two of these, which has become central to, both these, in my assessment, have become central to the discourse, the political discourse of the movement itself. Right? Now, number one, that anywhere in the world, the fact that agriculture can be left to the market, is a complete myth. And sections of the farmers had understood it very well earlier, especially those. But now the movement is increasingly articulating very clearly that this is something which is a myth. Look at the richest countries. Look at the kind of support that it provides to its own farmers. Right? Look at US, for instance, where the farming community is so small. It's a tiny kind of a segment of its overall workers and population and so on an average. As per the last year's stats, we are talking of more than $60,000 per annum as subsidy per farmer, right? For this small group. So what has happened? Agriculture, subjected to the logic of the market, kills and destroys farmers at large, right? If you want to keep them alive, the best way is not to let agri-businesses, agri-corporations and the logic of the market rule. But if perchance you have done that, then what do? You take care of them. You support them, right? In case of US, European Union, and now increasingly China, right? We are looking at direct income support apart from all kinds of subsidies which they provide. Now, I'm sure most of you are aware of the numbers. I've mentioned the US income support to the farmers. In case of EU last year, the total support for the farming sector was approximately USD 100 billion. Half of it was direct income support. Right? China, as per the most recent figure which is available, which is for 2016, it is much more than European Union. Many of you would be surprised. Right? This is USD 212 billion. Right? Now, please recall that China has a very large segment of the population dependent on agriculture. right? So there are two messages, as I said, which need to be flagged, and which is exactly, which has become central to the discourse of the movement. And that again is a very powerful lesson for me. One, you can't leave it to the markets, right? If you leave it to the markets, invariably there would be the rule of agribusinesses in any economy, right? And the second, if you have done that, you have to somehow take care of your farmers, right? Now, US does it, European Union does it, right? Now, why do we then, and this would be, Sandeep, my final point, that why do we then take this terrible detour of destruction, of, sort of decimating our farmers, etc., and then try and give them a little bit of support? Why not adopt a development strategy which allows you kind of nonsense, kind of deadly, devastating strategy, right? That is something which is becoming, and I find it very heartening. Many of us have been saying it for decades now, right? Especially academics from the global south and all those aligned with the left movement were raising these issues right from the word go, from the question of land reforms to a whole lot of other questions and other strategies, etc. But now the nail has been sort of hit on the head by the movement itself. So to conclude, this particular movement has extremely profound lessons for us to take home and to carry forward, not only how the struggle should be taken forward, but what should be the academic discourse underlying the struggle itself. Thank you again to the coordinators for including me in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Praveen, and thank you for largely keeping to time. Wonderful to hear you. And I think there are lots of additional lessons that you have brought in. We have our next speaker, Ms. Kanimozhi Karunanidhi, joining us. Are you here, Ms. Karunanidhi? Kanimozhi? I see her. She's just joining in. Are you here? Seems she's not joined, although her speaker is muted. So may then I, without delay, and use the time well, and actually invite another very key guest, Professor Yadav, Yogendra. Yogendra ji, are you here? Yes, he's here. So I would invite your intervention, sir. Next, now, Professor Yogendra Yadav, Yogendra ji, as we call him, is very, very well known, to all of us in the Indian citizenry. He, in the context of this particular discussion, may I introduce you that he is part of the 9-member coordination committee of the ongoing farmers movement, which is called the Sanyukta Kisan Morcha, the joint farmers platform, if you may. He is also part of the Jai Kisan Andolan. Actually, he represents the Jai Kisan Andolan on that Sanyukta Kisan Morcha, president of the Swaraj India, part and founder of the Swaraj Party of India, of the Swaraj Abhiyan of India, has been an activist, a teacher, a journalist, a person with a long revolutionary movement background, very, very active. So we are going to listen from one of the what the state now calls Andolan Jeevis, or what's called the protest humans, or humans who live in perpetual protest. That's how people who are actually raising the right questions and raising the right solutions are now labeled by the state So I have the honor and privilege to invite Yogendra ji to speak now. It's been wonderful. It's been inspirational to see your actions and on these years, but more particularly in the recent context on the farmer struggle. Honored to have you here, Yogendra ji. Over to you.
Thank you, Sandeep. First of all, my thanks to the Asia-Europe People's Forum for this wonderful opportunity, very, very unusual opportunity to connect with friends not only in India, but mainly outside India. And I see lots and lots of names of friends, colleagues, activists from outside India. My special welcome and thanks for this opportunity. My special thanks to the previous speakers who've actually lightened my burden. Amarjit ji, you've done half of the job that I had to do. And thank you. It's a remarkable comment on the worker peasants unity that a trade union leader presents the case of the farmers as well as farmers could have presented. So thank you, Amarjit ji. Thank you, Manoj bhai, for reducing my burden, for presenting much of what I would have otherwise had to state and the story I would have had to narrate. Let me use this occasion, and now that we have much of the facts and situation has been presented, allow me to use this occasion to ask an analytical question. How come a movement like this actually came into being and acquired the proportion that it has? Now, it's coincidentally, this is almost exactly 1 year ago, on 15th of May to be precise. So the third week of May, as we are in right now, third week of May last year, that the finance minister of India in a press conference, suddenly out of nowhere, in the series of press conferences that she was holding, we thought primarily to distract the media, primarily to hog television footage, she suddenly came up with this grand announcement that we are going to change the architecture of Indian agriculture. Mind you, this was in the midst of the pandemic. It was in the middle of a series of package relief measures being announced. So we were all stunned. You know, what does this measure have to do with relief to the farmers? Farmers did not want it. They did not demand it. In any case, it has absolutely nothing to do with COVID or the pandemic situation. That's when we realized that the government is using the pandemic to push through something that it wanted to do all the while. Now, to be absolutely candid, if you asked me 1 year ago, if you asked me on the 19th of May 2020, now that you know the finance minister has announced these laws, do you think these laws would lead to a nationwide farmers' protest, which would almost bring this government on its knees, which would become globally one of the best known movements? Honestly, my answer would have been, no, I don't think that would happen. You know, we are all retrospectively very wise. And we all tend to think that whatever happened in history was the only thing that could have happened. But I'll be candid with you. I know as soon as the finance minister made the declaration, the very next day we issued a statement denouncing it and so on. But we were very, very worried. We did not know that we would be able to create a nationwide struggle, nationwide movement against that. Why did I think that the movement will not take place? Because I think learning begins when we see what mistakes we may have committed. I would have given 4 reasons that day. I would have said, number one, the structure of Indian agriculture is such that we have very large number of very small farmers. And these small farmers, the average land holding in India is about 1 hectare. Now, these small, and about 80% of land is held by people whose land holding is less than 1 acre. So my argument 1 year ago would have been, it's very hard to get these very small farmers into a nationwide struggle, especially because most of them are not so clued into media. it may take them 1 or 2 years to understand what these laws are about. Number one. Number two, I would have given reason of collective action. I might have said that Indian farmers are so fragmented. They're fragmented not only along the lines of caste, religion, language, which is the very feature of Indian society, but they're also fragmented along class lines. There are divisions of land holding, which is very, very unequal still. Very large number of landless workers who are in Indian agriculture. It is also divided by cropping pattern. So if I look at the farmers in the North India of Punjab and Haryana who largely grow paddy and wheat, and I compare them to the farmers in Kerala, largely doing cash crops, coconut, cashew, and pepper, they live in two different continents, let alone two different countries. I mean, what is it that connects the two? I would have asked. So there's deep, very deep diversity of Indian farmers and farming, which makes them fragmented and which makes collective action very difficult. Third thing I might have said is, don't you know the regime? This regime is so repressive, comes down so heavily on the first sight of any serious protest. And it has media to back it up, as many of you in India know, of course, and many of you outside India would also be broadly familiar. It's like Mr. Putin's Russia, it's like Mr. Erdogan's Turkey. The mainstream media is largely under the control of the government. That's another reason why a nationwide struggle would have been very, very difficult. And finally, I might have said, don't you look at the time? This is pandemic. We have laws. And during this pandemic, even small protests are impossible. You could not even gather 100 people. I remember the first protest that we organized outside the Parliament House, when Manoj must have been inside the house. We were outside the Parliament trying to protest. And I know the kind of negotiations we had to do. This is 14th of September, the day the bill was being introduced in the Parliament. I know the kind of efforts we had to put in to get 100 people to at least sit outside, about a kilometer away from the Parliament. So 1 year ago, I would have said, any analyst would have said, any political commentator would have said, that yes, these are anti-farmer laws, but no, a nationwide movement is very unlikely because of reasons of structure, reasons of fragmentation, collective action, reasons of the nature of regime, and reasons of the nature of timing. But it happened. And how? The success is as extraordinary as was the lack of likelihood of its happening. We have a struggle, just the sheer numbers, the fact that the national capital is kind of surrounded by farmers from all sides. At some point, the number ran into almost 1 million people. The longevity, as we are almost about to hit 6 months. No one would have said we would last 6 days, and we are here for 6 months now. The sheer tenacity in the face of Indian winter, which for us Indians is very cold, for Europeans is not so cold, but lack of heating and being exposed and sitting on the road makes it truly cold. Weather, all kinds of difficulties the farmers have weathered. We've lost nearly 500 comrades so far in one form or another of the protest-related activities. And the movement has produced an extraordinary unity, something that Professor Praveen alluded to. The deep divisions on Hindu-Muslim lines that were created in Uttar Pradesh in particular evaporated almost overnight. The deep caste divides that the regime was actively promoted disappeared in Haryana, in Rajasthan. So there's an extraordinary success. And today it would not be an exaggeration to say that farmers' struggle today is leading, almost the vanguard of the protest for recovery of democracy in the country. So farmers today are not only leading the struggle for farmers' benefit, farmers are not only leading the struggle of the farmers and workers and all the working people of India, they are almost leading the struggle for recovery of democracy, for reclaiming the Republic of India. Why did this happen and what are the lessons? I'll summarize my lessons in the following words. What I have learned from what I might have said 1 year ago, what are the mistakes I have committed, and what are my learnings? Number one, never underestimate the moral economy of the peasant. Now, this is an expression, moral economy of the peasant. Some of the colleagues present here would remember, these are expressions that came from Marxist historians of Britain, actually, who tried to understand why did peasants rebel the way they did. And the idea was that peasants have a view, farmers have a view of what is fair, what is just. And if you do something that goes against that basic conviction of what is moral, what is just, what is fair, then, and if you disrupt this, the existing arrangement in ways that go against their basic ethical sense, then farmers uprise. This is what happened. These laws, farmers have not read these laws, they have broad sense of what these laws are about. But in some ways, these laws disrupted, at least for some part of India, farmers' basic sense of what was fair. They thought this is utterly unfair. And when you touch that raw nerve, the moral economy of the peasant, so moral economy of the peasant applies not only for 19th century, not only for 20th century farmers' protest, it applies in 21st century. It's very much alive. If you can touch it, that's one lesson for me. And that is why the cultural expressions that Amarjit talked about, the kind of outpouring of cultural expressions that we have seen, that happens only when a society's basic sense of fairness, right and wrong is touched and triggered. That continues to be one of the most powerful triggers of social movements. Second, the second lesson for me was farmers, the new generation of farmers are different. They understand law. Something that did not happen even 30, 40 years before in India. Now you have a young generation of farmers. You see many of them in protests in the morchas outside Delhi. They have one foot in their village, another foot in the urban areas. So they know urban areas enough to understand law. They have some sense of media. They are articulate. They can see what they are being deprived of. And the other foot in the village is a deep emotional bond that they have. They belong there. And these activists, I mean, the energy that they can unleash is something people like me have underestimated a year ago. So we have a young generation of farmers, farmer activists, farmer leaders, who in future are going to lead the movement. That's my second learning. Third learning is something all of us know, coalitions matter. This is an extraordinary success of coalition building. The organization I come from is a tiny organization, I must confess. We have some presence in about 8 states. There are organizations that are 100 times bigger than my organization. But even those organizations, which are 100 times bigger than mine, could not have created a movement like this. The success of Sanyukta Kisan Morcha is that it brought together farmers' organizations cutting across ideological lines. There are left organizations, and there are people who would say, I would never touch a comrade with a barge pole. They are also part of this movement. So both left and non-left are part of the movement here. There are Gandhians, there are environmentalists, all ideological shades are present here. There are ideological shades of, apart from ideological shades, organizations which are affiliated informally with political parties. A large number of political parties are also there. Organizations which are present in different regions of the country and had never spoken to one another. They are very much part of this movement. So a very large coalition making, and one day I can get into a story of how difficult it was to weave that coalition, because I was involved in that initial efforts for the first 2 or 3 months to create that almost an impossible looking coalition. So the third lesson is coalitions make a difference. They are necessary. Sometimes they are almost sufficient. Now that we are on coalition, I should also mention the attempt to make coalition with the trade unions. Amarjit ji is here, and I should specifically underline that trade unions were extraordinary in their generosity. Frankly, for the first few weeks of the movement, we were so drowned in our work and so on. We had no hosho havas, as they say in Hindi. We had no idea what was happening outside. But friends like Amarjit Kaur, friends in the trade union movement, on their own extended unity, this was a one-sided extension of unity and support. That really made a difference. One specific kind of coalition or support from outside made a difference, which is almost incidental in this case, which is support coming from non-resident Indians. It so happened that most of the farmers that came in the first wave were from the Punjab in India. And Punjab, it so happens, is one of the states which has very strong connections with NRIs in UK, in US and Canada. So they came out in big numbers. That made a huge difference in terms of media perception, in terms of resources. Finally, my final lesson is never underestimate your opponent. That is to say, never underestimate your opponent's stupidities and follies. You know, the duo that governs India is known to be perhaps the most clever, perhaps the most cruel rulers that we've had in this country. And they are sometimes imagined to be people who can do what they like. But farmers' movement showed that once people stand up, they commit mistake after mistake after mistake. So never underestimate your opponent's follies, that they would commit mistakes once you push them into a very serious confrontation. They would make strategic mistakes, they would make communication blunders and so on. So these are some of the lessons, and I would just leave with one final thought, which is a global question. In 19th century, we thought proletariat was the vanguard of revolution. Now, I'm not saying that in 21st century, peasants are going to be vanguards of a global resistance. Probably the idea of vanguard is not a very good idea. But are we looking at a situation where peasants in different parts of the world, when they are pitted against the global capitalist order, they inevitably come into a confrontation, which, if approached properly, can make them, and I'm not saying only the peasants and perhaps in the third world context, our kind of precariat that we see. So it's not proletariat, it is a precariat in the third world context. Could these be the real agents and engines of change? That's a question I leave with you. These are some of the learnings of a beautiful and a very powerful journey. Thank you.
So, Yogendra ji, thank you for those very insightful lessons into the passage of history and into the passage of future. Obviously, we should not repeat the same mistakes. You ended with a question of protagonism. The protagonism, who are the protagonists, or who would be the protagonist of the 21st century revolution and change? It's an interesting question which Amarjit began with. So I kind of leave it there, because this whole question of who's a peasant and who's a worker, who's a farmer and who's a worker, has somewhat been obfuscated, if I may say. But without getting into my views on that, as I'm a moderator today, I think our last speaker, and I want to say that is still not joined, and she is on her way in Tuticorin, Miss Karunanidhi, Kanimozhi Karunanidhi. So I'll try and give it a pause here. Actually, hand it over to my, and we're going to miss her if she doesn't join, because she would have got a perspective from Tamil Nadu. She is an elected member of parliament from Tamil Nadu, from the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam party, and a very, very forceful voice in the parliament on people's questions, as well as on the question of farm laws. And they're recently in power in the state of Tamil Nadu, and that's what's holding her. I think there's some issues there in reference to chief minister's sudden calls for meeting. So I'm not sure if she's going to join in the time remaining. And with this, therefore, with this wonderful input to end with from Shri Yogendra Yadav, raising more issues for us, I want to hand it over to my co-moderator, Kathy Bernaerts. Kathy is supposed to do the moderation of the question answer sessions. We've seen a lot of questions in the chat box. Keep them coming, keep them focused to the issue at hand, the lessons. All our panelists have spoken from different vantage points to the lessons, hope, optimism, as well as challenges that the farmers' question and the farmers' struggle gives to us Indians, to our democracy in India, to our state in India, to the national question in India, but also of the global South. And that, therefore, is not an isolated question from the global North. The question of decolonization hangs, and I want to sort of open it up here and invite Kathy to now moderate the next bit with reference to questions which have come. Speakers, given the time, we probably will have a shorter intervention round from you to end with, but over to you, Kathy.
Okay, thank you so much, Sandeep, and thank you all the speakers, of course, for your very interesting and valuable inputs. We have several questions, and I'm not sure if we will be able to deal with all of them, because then I think we'll run much over time, and there's other sessions of APF 13 that are going to start later today also. So I would like to begin maybe with a question that was actually addressed to all of you. So maybe you could have, maybe we can have all of you to give some input on that, which was the question from a peasant network in Cambodia, asking what have actually been the strategies to organize and mobilize the solidarity and the movement. I think Yogendra already talked a little bit into that it was difficult, but the question is, like, how did you actually do that? What could be some lessons for peasant movements in other countries to take that with them and to also address that? Maybe Yogendra, you can start, and then I would suggest if other speakers also want to address this question, they just let me know, and then we go to you as well. Okay?
Thank you. I don't know what the lessons for other places would be, but I can say 2 or 3 things that clicked. First of all, the movement took roots in, and the strongest reaction came from the state of Punjab. Now, the state of Punjab is a state where farmers' movement have been pretty strong for the last 20 years. So to my mind, the first lesson then is one concentrated area where there are movements with deep roots and are very powerful. Second, existence of pre-existing networks. I would mention the All India Kisan Sangharsh Coordination Committee, which we had formed in 2017, an organization that brought together more than 200 farmers' organizations on a single platform. We had conducted several events, we had conducted several marches and so on. Nothing of this scale, but there was a pre-existing network into which sudden energies could be passed on. So to my mind, the second lesson is informal or formal networks which are formed much in advance, where there is building of relationship, building of trust, sharing of information, sharing of strategies. That's the second thing that made a difference. And third was innovative use of social media. because the mainstream media had been nearly captured by the government, so completely dominated by the government that there's very little space available for us. But social media was used very innovatively. I would particularly underline the role of singers, artists, poets in the very first movement, first phase of the movement when it was Punjab specific. These were catalysts for taking these things very rapidly forward. Finally, I would say a shared understanding in the leadership. It is an understanding which doesn't happen immediately and has to be renewed every 7 or 10 days. That we swim collectively and we sink collectively. So the significance of collectivity, of coalition, of staying together, of somehow working together, that has been, these are some of the things that have worked. I could say, well, the laws were against the farmers and farmers rose on their own. But as we know, in reality, these things don't happen then.
Thank you very much. I think, Amarjit, Kaur, would you also
Yes.
like to address this question? Maybe also an additional one, because this was actually addressed to you, whether you have an idea on why there was less participation from movements in the south of India. There's one person who was addressing this question actually towards you. I'm not sure if you can also address that while answering the other one. Thank you.
Yes, some points have been raised by Yogendra ji. He has answered those questions. So I go by that it is the collective leadership and the democratic functioning of the coalition which came into being of farmers, which has brought it up to this level. And really, we have been observing very carefully from trade unions also the way they handled. We knew in their discussions, far and against, there were views, but still they went by with their consensus and then they brought it as a united issue to be carried forward. And we respect that part, the way the movement is handled. I have been asked this question by 2-3 persons that why in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana and Tamil Nadu that kind of movement and support is not there. There I want to tell that the government built up a narrative as if this movement belongs only to Punjab. They failed. When Haryana joined, they started saying it is Punjab and Haryana. When UP joined, they said it is only Punjab, Haryana and UP. When Rajasthan joined, then they talked of only these 4 states. But the truth of the matter is from every corner of India, the people came in groups to the site of agitation at the border of Delhi. And we trade unions saw to it. If the farmers are coming, we support them. All technical support we should give, financial support we should give. We should see to it that they reach. And where it is not possible for farmers groups to go, we mobilized trade unions and other groups and we sent them to these border areas. So the message from border areas to go to those states and from those states people coming, getting the message and taking it back, that thing was being done. So it became pan-India movement, as Yogendra also has said. And Kanimozhi, if she would have joined, she could have told this thing. I know long jathas were organized, even from state of Odisha, from Bengal, from Bihar, from Maharashtra, from Kerala, the jathas were organized from Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Telangana, the groups came, not only from nearby states. But it is not easier for those people to come and keep sitting on the borders of Delhi. So borders of Delhi, naturally, that had to be handled by those who are in the vicinity of borders. So this should be understood by the people, and this we told our people when they questioned us, why the people from other states are not coming and sitting. And it was in such a cold weather after November, you cannot imagine southern part of India people coming and sitting over there. But still many of those people without much preparation, they came, even some groups came from southern part of India also. So it is not that in Andhra Pradesh or Telangana or Tamil Nadu, they have not understood what is the issue about. one central question why we must understand is that it was very conscious effort when the Constitution of India was made. Land question was kept with the states. So in the federal structure formation of our country, our constitution provides us this question of land to be with the states. And suddenly these steps of the government has brought this into question mark. So we knew that in different states, the state governments were wary about it. The issue which Manoj was referring about, how it will impact in our state. But the biggest issue is in federal structure of this country, how could central government suddenly try to control the land and hand over to corporate friends? So this issue has caught imagination of farmers in other states also. So it's a question of propaganda, campaign and everything. So I want to stop there as far as that question is concerned. Then somebody is asking me in the question box, what to do? The government is not listening. My answer is this movement has made several achievements and all my co-panelists have spoken about it. Achievement is not only in the form of if the government will ultimately one day announce, okay, we have taken back the laws. It was a big achievement even to that level when the government said 1.5 years, we will suspend it. But the farmers' leadership saw some conspiracy in it. That they may once again say the same thing, no, the laws are okay, you come about to discuss with us something else. Because the government was repeating both the things. Don't talk to us on laws, they are okay, talk to us on something else. Why should anybody will talk to them on something else? Their main issues are to be ignored. So we don't look at it, the victory only the demands put. As a trade unionist, I will say, we put hundreds of demands and we know what victory is at particular stage. And we achieve that victory and then we gain the strength, we move steps a little behind and then with more energy, we push. This is how we do as trade unions. But I don't say that the same way the farmers' leadership will do. They will assess the way they assess how they have to move forward. We have to make commitment. Yes, we are with you. And I fully agree that when the people were in depression, in anxiety also, and saying that without changing full stop at comma in the Indian constitution, the core values of constitution are being crushed. It is at that stage that the farmers challenged this government. And that's where the biggest victory lies. That now the ball is set rolling. Government can be challenged. All groups and people can withstand whatever oppression or suppression this government tries to do. So if anybody says that if they don't listen, what will happen? I think these 5 state election results show. And if Mission Uttar Pradesh and Mission Uttarakhand, the way Kisan movement wants to carry forward and trade unions will support, that will be another. These will be step-by-step achievements, which will ultimately bring achievements the way the farmers are looking at asking for it. And lastly, I want to say, the great lesson is how Modi media was challenged. Young boys and girls started newspapers there. They called it Tractor Times or something time. Different names were given. Every fake news and every fake narrative and wrong narrative was answered by the youngsters there. Sitting over there, bringing out newspapers, telling what is fake, when on 26th January, the government wanted to hide through its own media, the powerful media, that 1 lakh means 100,000 tractors were flying national flag of the country and were having successful march in the border areas of Delhi. To hide that fact, something happened, some conspiracy also happened, and that was made as the main news to defame the farmers. But the media being handled by youngsters, the social media, which the co-panelists are pointing out, they saw to it that within 24 hours, that depressing situation, The attack which the government media had brought on was tackled and was countered. And when everybody felt that now everything is gone, this movement will be suppressed, these farmers will be removed, and the movement bounced back in 24 hours because the message could reach down below that this is conspiracy of the government. Let us be together and see to it. And then the attendance at the border areas increased instead of decreasing. So I would say that this movement is already pan-India, but mobilization and where and at what place this is. Another strength is they used symbols, and I think that will continue. Great names in the history, their days were observed. They kept the movement on their toes, keeping symbols in front, and then again, next step. So always reviewing and looking at the history, gaining strength from their movement from pre-independence era period, and there to, in order to stop my intervention, I want to say, in 1906 and 1907, British regime had brought 3 laws on farmers. And when the struggle started to fight back those 3 laws, there was unity between leader of the working class and the leader of the farmers movement. The great Bhagat Singh, martyr, his uncle Ajit Singh, and the great man Lala Lajpat Rai, who became founder president of All India Trade Union Congress, they together led the movement against British. And the way today we are finding songs, theatre, poetry, everything coming up at the border areas and across the board, not only pre-26 November, but post-26 November also. That happened, that is also from our history. In history, that movement got to be known as Pagdi Sambhal Jatta. There was a famous song. And the Britishers had to move back and to take back all the 3 laws they had brought. So that those lessons from that period are also we took to our trade unions and told them, look, we were together fighting against British rule. And we have to once again bring those examples in front of us to give strength to this movement and to gain strength from this movement. And that is how I think we also, let me tell in this webinar, frankly, in our trade, I'm closing.
Your closing words. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Only closing. As a trade union, I'm telling this to you today. We decided in whichever state, if yet the farmers organizations are finding it difficult to take it to every nook and corner, trade unions should see to it that on their call, on their agenda, no area is left out. Stand there with your trade union flags, invite 1 or 2 Kisan leaders and stand there and popularize that movement. We did it because we looked into this movement as something setting the ball rolling against this government, which other democratic forces of our society were also looking at and joining. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. As we said already in the beginning, it will be very difficult to handle all the questions. So the proposal is now that we just ask the speakers who haven't been able to respond to questions to give us a few minutes of their closing words. And after that, unfortunately, we will have to close the session because some of the people here may also be sitting ready to join other sessions after this one. So, yes.
Kathy,
yes.
I had 2 questions. I'll take 1 minute in responding.
Yes,
one
I
was
wanted
from,
to give you the word. One second.
One
yes.
was Farooq Tariq and another was Jaigam Abbas. 2 questions. The first was regarding the neoliberal state. Unfortunately, we thought that the neoliberal state in the 1990s, that the state shall be marginalized. But you know, with the idea of a strong super leader, it has evolved as a market state with a hyphen, where a state after the hyphen comes with a big S. So that has somehow disturbed the very rhythm, the way we looked at resistance against neoliberal policies. The second was from Jagam Abbas, that whether this movement has dented the right-wing propaganda. I would say marginally yes. Why I say this marginally yes? Because that the right-wing propaganda is so cleverly and meticulously woven around everyday life discourse. I mean, I just said earlier, forget farmers movement, anti-CA protest, even a humanitarian crisis like pandemic has a right-wing narration coming out and dominating our thinking every day. But the fact remains, the silver line is that this movement has told us what we learned for the neoliberalism in 1990s. It was called there is no alternative, Tina factor. So that Tina factor against right-wing authoritarian posture has been dented, and this small dent, I am very sure I share the optimism of my co-panelists that, and assure the two question raiser, Jagam and Farooq, that believe us, we'll have a better subcontinent, a better world, and that shall be probably on the lines our forefathers thought, not these supreme leaders thought or are thinking. Thank you very much, Inqilab.
Thank you so much. Praveen, sir, could I also give you some last words, please?
All right, since we are already beyond time, I will take half a minute. Connecting with a question which I saw in the chat box, some gentleman who's heading some economics institute says that it is not taking anything away from the farmers. No, it is taking a hell of a lot from farmers. Basically, there is a contestation laissez-faire capitalism, regulated capitalism. Laissez-faire capitalism is a disaster for farming in general, for petty producers in general. And this is something which, in my understanding and comprehension, the political discourse of the movement has at least started kind of understanding better and articulating better. And partly it is based on the experience of farmers in northwestern India, where even the smallest, the most marginal farmers had gained from regulated capitalism. So that is very important to understand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Seeing that we are already beyond the time, I think, and I'm looking at my co-moderator, Sandeep, to give me permission to start the closing, unless you have another. Okay, thank you, Sandeep. Okay, so first of all, of course, I would like to thank you to all the speakers very much for being here and to share your insights on what is and has been a most remarkable and very important movement. It was very interesting to hear all your thoughts about it, and I'm sure I saw in the chat that equally a lot of people think the same. We've also had a lot of people following the webinar on Facebook. And again, it's also being recorded, so afterwards you will be able to share it widely, because I think what has been discussed here on the lessons has been very important. Before I hand over to my co-moderator Sandeep, I would just like to say that the AEPF 13 conference will continue until the 24th of May, so until next Monday, with more sessions on different topics. And apart from a range of thematic sessions, we'll also have daily plenary sessions from 10 to 12 CET. Tomorrow it will be on COVID-19 and the broken economic system. On Friday, we'll have a plenary session on income security. On Saturday, we have a plenary session on peace and security in Asia and Europe. Sunday will be a session on the right to dissent, where also a 10-country report will be discussed. On Monday, the closing date, will actually be a full day of plenary sessions, including an interface with parliamentarians, a session where we'll discuss the way forward, and a closing rally. So we all welcome you there. Please check the program on the AEPF website, and thank you all for being here. And I would now like to hand over to my colleague and co-moderator Sandeep to close the session. Thank you.
No, thank you. I'm not going to, given the time as well as the width and depth of the issues raised, I'm not going to be able to even attempt to summarize what's been said. I just want to take the occasion to say two things. First of all, to express deep gratitude to our leaders who were there today: Amarjit Kaur, Praveen, Yogendra Yadav, Manoj. We got apologies from Kanimozhi because of delays. To my co-moderator Kathy, to the team which has tirelessly worked behind, Tabby, to Shushovan and Katie and so many others, Farooqji, so many others from the food sovereignty cluster of the Asia-Europe People's Forum 13, of which I'm also a part, and so is Kathy. Honored to be with you. I want to take the opportunity to thank all the people who stayed on till the very end of this extremely insightful, I've seen many inspirational, revolutionary session. It keeps the hope alive. I know time is ending. I want to say that the farmers' movement and the farmers' struggle, which was spoken about, is one of the very few beacons of the 21st century, actually picking on the unresolved questions of the 20th and the centuries before it. The question of agriculture, the question of land, the question of global south, the question of colonization. These are all unsettled questions. The question of women at the very heart of it. The question of what the hollowness of representative democracies, and the question of democratization and people's democracy. I think there are several issues which the farmers' movement takes it on in the way our esteemed panelists have analyzed it from very in-depth standpoints. And it is with that that we must view the farmers' movement and encourage the farmers' movement today. It is not just a question of India. It is not just the national question of India. It represents the national questions of several continents, unresolved national questions which cry out for attention and resolution in this century. And it is for this reason we must extend our deepest salutations and solidarity with the struggle. It is not a lonely struggle, with the struggle that is going on. We expect more and more of you and the organizations who've been here today to be in touch with the panelists. We will share the links and the details today with you, to also join the movement in the ways you can, in the solidarity you can in your respective continents and countries. With that, I take this occasion to thank you once again, to wish you well, to encourage you to join other sessions, and a deep gratitude for finding the time here to be with us today. Thank you, and this is to close the session. Sorry we could not accommodate all the questions. I would have loved to extend it to 1 hour, and I was asking Kathy, and she said it's not possible. We understand, and thank you very much. All the very best. Bye-bye. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.